Welcome back to the Daily Crypto Deep Dive. Today we are not talking about price targets. We're not talking about short-term volatility. We're not even talking about the next pump. We're talking about something far more important. Something that could directly impact how safe your Bitcoin actually is. Because right now, there is a growing wave of projects calling themselves Bitcoin Layer 2s. They promise faster transactions, smart contracts, DeFi on Bitcoin, yield on Bitcoin, capital efficiency, scaling solutions. They promise to unlock Bitcoin. But here's the uncomfortable question you need to ask yourself as a listener and as an investor. If your Bitcoin is sitting on one of these Layer 2s, are you still protected by Bitcoin? Or did you unknowingly swap Bitcoin's proof-of-work security for something else? This is where things get serious. Let's define this clearly so nobody gets confused. A real Layer 2 must inherit security from the base layer. If the Layer 2 operators disappear tomorrow, if the company shuts down, if the validators stop responding, you must still be able to recover your Bitcoin using nothing but Bitcoin's consensus rules. No permission, no governance vote, no bridge committee, just cryptographic enforcement. That's the gold standard. When people say they are building on Bitcoin, in simple terms it means they are creating software or systems that use Bitcoin's network as the foundation instead of creating a completely separate currency from scratch. There are a few main ways this is done. The simplest way is building an application that interacts with the Bitcoin blockchain directly. For example, a wallet, a payment processor, or a Lightning Network app. In that case, developers use Bitcoin nodes and existing protocols to send and verify transactions without changing Bitcoin itself. A more advanced route is building a Layer 2 or side system. That usually starts with running a Bitcoin node to monitor the chain, then creating smart contract logic or payment channels that anchor back to Bitcoin transactions. If someone wants to build something more complex, like a sidechain, they design their own network, then create a bridge mechanism that locks Bitcoin on the main chain and issues a representation of it on their new chain. The key starting point for any builder is understanding Bitcoin's rules, how transactions are structured, how signatures work, how blocks are validated, and how security is enforced through proof of work. From there, developers decide whether they want to extend Bitcoin without changing it, build alongside it, or propose upgrades to it. And that choice determines how secure, decentralized, and aligned with Bitcoin their project truly is. Many projects branding themselves as Bitcoin Layer 2s require you to bridge your Bitcoin into their system. That Bitcoin is locked in a multi-sig wallet or controlled by a federation of validators. You receive a synthetic version of Bitcoin on their chain. That chain runs its own consensus, often proof of stake, often governed by token holders, often secured by a brand new governance token. The moment you do that, you have left Bitcoin's trust model. You are no longer secured by global hash power. You are secured by a smaller set of actors. Now let's bring this down to something practical for you listening right now. If you are holding Bitcoin purely on-chain, your risk is market volatility. If you are holding Bitcoin on a custodial exchange, your risk is counterparty solvency. But if you are holding Bitcoin bridged into a sidechain marketed as an L2, your risk profile changes again. Now you're exposed to bridge risk, validator collusion risk, governance risk, token incentive risk, and sometimes regulatory risk, depending on the jurisdiction of the operator. Bridges have been the single largest exploit vector in crypto history. Billions of dollars have been lost through compromised multisigs and validator attacks. Every time, the story is the same. Assets were locked, keys were compromised, peg broke, users were stuck. So when someone says, "We've built DeFi on Bitcoin," your next thought should be, at what cost to security? Now let's be fair, there is real demand here. Bitcoin holders want yield. They want to use their Bitcoin without selling it. They want exposure to DeFi opportunities. They want programmable finance without abandoning Bitcoin. That demand is legitimate. The problem isn't innovation. The problem is clarity. Because innovation that changes the trust model must be priced differently than innovation that preserves it. Now let's contrast this with Lightning, because Lightning is often cited as a real Layer 2. Lightning isn't flashy. It doesn't have a token. It doesn't promise you double-digit returns. But if your counterparty tries to cheat you, you can settle the dispute back to Bitcoin's base layer. That's security inheritance. It works within Bitcoin's architecture. Many of the newer projects do not. They introduce governance tokens. They introduce staking. They introduce validator incentives. And here's the structural risk. If their token collapses in price, validator incentives weaken. If validator incentives weaken, network security weakens. If network security weakens, trust collapses. And once trust collapses, liquidity leaves. Bitcoin doesn't operate that way. Bitcoin's security budget doesn't depend on a governance token pumping. Now let's make this relevant to your portfolio. If you are allocating capital into a Bitcoin Layer 2 token, you need to understand what you are buying. You are not buying Bitcoin security. You are buying exposure to a parallel system that uses Bitcoin as collateral. That may still be profitable. It may even outperform Bitcoin in certain cycles. But it carries different structural risk, different failure modes, different stress responses, different exit mechanics. In a bull market, none of this matters. In a bull market, token prices pump and risk assumptions are ignored. But we are not in a purely speculative retail cycle anymore. We have ETFs. We have institutional flows. We have macro volatility. We have political risk. Infrastructure scrutiny is increasing. When institutional capital evaluates infrastructure, it asks very simple questions. Can funds exit permissionlessly? Does settlement anchor to Layer 1? Who controls the keys? What happens under stress? If those answers are vague, capital stays cautious. Now let's zoom out further. Should Bitcoin even try to become Ethereum? Ethereum was designed for programmability. It embraces complexity. It upgrades frequently. Bitcoin was designed for monetary certainty. It upgrades slowly. It values ossification. Trying to bolt Ethereum-style DeFi onto Bitcoin without altering Bitcoin itself creates tension. Either you change Bitcoin, which the community resists, or you build adjacent systems and change the trust assumptions. There is no magical middle ground. And this is where you need to think critically. If you want pure Bitcoin security, stay on Bitcoin or on systems that settle directly back to it. If you want programmability and yield, accept that you are adding risk. There is no such thing as free yield on the most secure monetary network in the world, without trade-offs. Now let's talk about what happens in a stress event. Imagine macro volatility spikes. Imagine equity markets drop sharply. Liquidity tightens. A bridged Bitcoin ecosystem sees heavy withdrawals. The bridge experiences congestion. Validators must process redemptions. If enough pressure hits at once, can the system handle it? Or does it pause? Does governance intervene? Does withdrawal timing change? These are not comfortable questions, but they are essential ones. Because in crypto, architecture always gets tested eventually. Some of these Bitcoin-adjacent ecosystems may survive. Some may innovate responsibly. Some may find ways to anchor more deeply into Bitcoin's base layer over time. But the ones that survive will be the ones that respect Bitcoin's trust model, not bypass it. And that brings us back to you. If you are holding Bitcoin for long-term monetary exposure, be extremely cautious about moving it into systems you don't fully understand. If you are speculating on Layer 2 tokens, treat them as speculative infrastructure plays, not as Bitcoin proxies. Now ask yourself, are you investing in digital gold, or are you investing in experimental programmable ecosystems collateralized by digital gold? Those are two different strategies. And in this cycle, clarity will outperform confusion. So next time you hear Bitcoin Layer 2, don't get swept up in the branding. Ask one brutally simple question. If everyone running this network disappeared tomorrow, could I still get my Bitcoin back using only Bitcoin's rules? If the answer is yes, you're likely looking at something structurally aligned. If the answer is no, you're looking at a parallel system. That doesn't make it evil. It doesn't make it useless. But it does change the risk equation. And in this market, where institutional scrutiny, macro volatility, and infrastructure maturity are all increasing, understanding that difference could protect your capital. Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash like, follow, and as always, we will see you at the top.